1966 I found my love. In 1967 I had a
Hello and welcome back to Bookish. Today I have another tag. I was tagged to do the Pick a Year tag by Shawn the Book Maniac. This tag was originally created by Mel's Bookland Adventures. Yes, I think that's right. I'll leave a link to both her channel and to Shawn's channel and their tag videos in the description box down below. The idea behind this tag is you pick a year and then you look up books that were published in that year, and you kind of answer some prompts based on books published in that year. Well, I picked the year 1967 because that's the year in which I was born, and so I thought that's as good a year as any. And so I just looked up on the internet, and I think most of the information comes from Goodreads, books that were published in 1967 that I could use to answer these prompts. So the first prompt, other than pick a year, the first prompt is a book I've read or heard of that was published in 1967. Well, the first book I saw that was published in 1967 is one of my favorite books of all time, 100 Years of Solitude. This is my now somewhat infamous vomited on copy, which if you think it's in my 10 strange bookish facts about me video, I tell the story of why this book is in that condition. But I love 100 Years of Solitude. I'm an admirer of Garcia Marquez's work, and I say that as someone who's not always a fan of magical realism, which is odd. The second book that I saw on the list published in 1967 that I've definitely read is The Master and Margarita by Mikhail Bulgakov. This book is just one of those intensely weird, pleasurable, beautiful, odd, strange reading experiences that you can have. And I have a feeling that with most people, when they read The Master and Margarita, they either love it or they just can't get all the way into it. But my advice would be, if you ever hear about this book title again and you think about reading this book, pick it up and make yourself read it. I'm not saying it's in my top 10 favorite books or maybe even my top 20, but it is an experience, and for the most part, to me, a pleasurable experience with what I think is a truly moving, if not strange, really strange story. Anyway, so that was the second book I saw published in 1967 that I had read. Let's see. Oh, also there's Smith of Wootton Major, which I'll put a picture of probably right over here. Smith of Wootton Major is a story by J.R.R. Tolkien, which I probably read during the time period in which I was attempting to become a Tolkien completist. I gave up on that some time ago. At some point I just stopped reading posthumous works. I wish I could tell you that I remember what Smith of Wootton Major was about, but I don't. But I do know I read it, and it's back there on the shelf somewhere. So then there were other books I'd read about. Also, these were kind of had a tendency to be kids' books. So one, just literally picture, cardboard, what do you call those, board books that I've read, not when I was a kid, but as a parent, was Brown Bear, which also apparently was published in 1967. And I can't remember how it goes. I probably should have gotten a copy out so I could have read it to you, but it's more or less Brown Bear, what do you see? I see something looking at me, and then whatever it is, the next thing in the list, or the thing the brown bear sees, then you just repeat, I don't know, alligator, what do you see, and so on. And it goes like that. But I read that book to my kids when they were babies and little kids, probably 100 times each, as a conservative figure. And then the last book I saw published in 1967 that I read was the kind of children's novel from the Mixed Up Files of Mrs. Basil E. Frankweiler, which, every time I see that title, I want to read that book again, even though, it is clearly a kid's book, but it's just so much fun and such a great kid's book. And I have to be honest with you, when I saw it was published in the year I was born, I was actually pleased that I shared something in common with a book that was so important to me and that I loved so much when I was a kid. So then you're also supposed to name books that were published in 1967 which you've heard of. Well, I think the most famous book maybe published in 1967 was The Outsiders by S.E. Hinton. So I think I'm the only person in America of my age who has not read The Outsiders. And I do remember watching the movie because when I was kind of a kid in the early 80s, it was this movie that had kind of this male cast of teen heartthrobby type people. I think Patrick Swayze's in it. I want to say Matt Dillon's in it. Anyway, all I remember is "Stay True, Pony Boy" from the movie. I don't really know who Pony Boy is, so go ahead and roast me, I guess, for never having read The Outsiders. But at this point in time, it doesn't really appeal to me, which then leads to the third prompt, or maybe this is the second prompt. I lost track already, and that is are there any books that were published in 1967 which look interesting to you? And the answer to that question is definitely yes. There is Trout Fishing in America by Richard Brautigan. I've read some short stories by Brautigan, and I know that Trout Fishing in America was one of his more successful, important books. Maybe I'm just remembering that wrong. And then the other title that I've heard of from 1967 that I think sounds interesting is The Confessions of Nat Turner by William Styron. There was some controversy involving this because it was, a white author writing from inside the head of an African-American man who was involved in the slave rebellion. That's who Nat Turner was. And I know there was some controversy about that. I also know it either won the Pulitzer or the National Book Award that year. It is an interesting title. I've read other books by William Styron, so that's probably actually one that I might, actually get around to reading. Prompt number 4 was the most obscure sounding book. Well, this is one of those occasions where there's a prompt in a tag video that I feel like is about to expose my ignorance. I looked through the list at the ones I thought sounded the most obscure. And for me, the most obscure sounding one was A Grain of Wheat by Ngugi wa Thiong'o, who I believe is a Nigerian writer, who was published as a part of an attempt to publish new writers from Africa back in the 1960s. Anyway, I'd never heard of the author or that book, and I'm pretty sure Shawn has, since he reads so widely from different continents and from authors of all kinds of different backgrounds and places. So, Shawn, go ahead and feel free to let me know that I'm an ignorant clod for not knowing about A Grain of Wheat. And then the last prompt was to pick the book with the published in 1967 with the strangest cover, and that would be this book right here. It's The Joke by Milan Kundera. Kundera was kind of a big deal author in the late 80s, right around the time of the end of the Cold War, and Czechoslovakia's kind of breaking away from communism and electing Václav Havel, a poet, I believe, and writer, as the first president of the Czech Republic. And Kundera I'm not sure if he's still alive, was a Czechoslovakian writer, and his book, The Unbearable Lightness of Being, was made into a movie in the late 80s, and I bought the book and I read it, and I liked the book. I liked the movie too. Daniel Day-Lewis plays the main character, and Juliette Binoche is the female lead, I believe, and then, I forgot the name of the other lady in it, but the movie is one of those it felt like one of those arty movies with, a lot of nudity and sex in it that was really kind of popular maybe in the late 80s. Anyway, I like the book, and I've never read The Joke by Kundera, but this book cover, looks really strange to me. Anyway, so there it is. There's my pick a year book tag. Thanks to Shawn for tagging me in this, and I look forward to hearing what you had to say about my failure to read The Outsiders in the comment section below. Thanks for watching.